right. That was the legendary John Lee Hooker playing the music for us this morning with Boogie Chillin'. John, why did you choose Boogie Chillin'? Well, today's subject, continuing on the sandwich generation, is what adult parents of minor children can do for their kiddos and how it will make everyone in the family's life better. Therefore, I chose Boogie Chillin'. I'm hoping to raise our children to boogie, right? Welcome, everybody. John Miller, founding attorney, Rock Solid Law, 30 years ago now. And I'm sitting in our new offices in Ponte, Vedra, which is sort of a cool thing for us because this is right back where it all began. I started the firm in 1991 in Ponte Vedra, and we have found our way back. I have to admit to you, it wasn't a goal to return to where we started. Of course, I wanted to stay at the beaches, but we needed a bigger office as we welcome our new attorney to the firm. Kathy Espinoza brings a wealth of experience, particularly on the estate planning and probate side for us. And Millie, thank you. Oh, I'm glad you like it here. Missed you when you came in. Appreciate it. Yes, my wife and I had a lovely trip. Speaking of our children, it was our first trip without our children more than 2 days away. And should you be a parent on the line this morning, I highly recommend you don't wait a dozen years like we did to do something like that. I will also tell you that the Azore Islands, some volcanic islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, are only a 4-hour direct flight from Boston. And it's beautiful. And of course, they're part of Portugal. They have a really neat culture there and just physically beautiful place should you ever choose to go. Now, I've digressed plenty. Today, we're going to continue our conversation on the sandwich generation. And we've been talking about the fact that, due to medical advances and also a cultural change, people are living longer, and we're also having babies as a culture later in our lives. Back in the Middle Ages, one would only expect to live about 30, 32 years. Can you imagine? That was the entire generation's lifespan. Now, the average lifespan in the United States is about 80 years. And I would say that someone born today, in my opinion, has a really good chance of living to the age of 100 because of the advances in medicine. And, certainly during my 60 years, there have been amazing advances, and we would anticipate there being more. By the way, one of the things I love about Jacksonville is the incredible amount of medical business that goes on here. I mean, we couldn't ask for better healthcare providers. But anyway, because people are living longer and because people are having babies later, it raises the possibility of more people participating in a sandwich generation, which is not like baby boomers, Gen X, greatest generation kind of a generation. A sandwich generation is any group of more or less middle-aged adults who care both for their aging parents and for their minor children. We talked last time about what folks could do to help their aging parents in strengthening the family. Today, we're going to talk about the same thing for minor children. But the sandwiched people become responsible both for caring for those elders and the youth at the same time. And they do tons of stuff. In each family, it'll be different, but often those would include daily functions. Got my little boy ready for camp this morning. Medical services, making sure the right pills are taken at the right time. Supervision of that. Aiding in financials. I know a lot of folks that help their parents just getting their bills paid, and legal issues, right? So a lot of people I meet with are multi-generations, mother-son, father-daughter, grandparent-grandson, who are taking care of each other. So they need to take care of their loved ones as well as themselves. And so part of what I've wanted to focus on in this series of webinars is estate planning. Yes, it's about what happens to your stuff, but it's also about taking care of you while you're alive, which in my opinion is equally important. We want to make sure that we take good care of ourselves. Right now, 1 in every 8 Americans between the ages of 40 and 70 is both raising a child and caring for a parent. And in addition, between 7 and 10 million adults care for their aging parents from long distance, which is just as important. Um, the people in our country, excuse me, age 65 or older will double by the year 2030. Double from now. That's 10 years, folks, to over 70 million people. Good morning. That means there'll be even more people participating in the sandwich generation. So you may ask yourself, what can we do for our minor children? I like to say children or kiddos. I don't like kids because it's a baby goat, but I like kiddos. I like children because John Lee Hooker, right? I don't need any more excuse than that. What can we do that will make their lives better and our lives better? I will tell you that for minor children, there is less to think about than there is with aging adults. But I will also tell you that a majority of people are motivated by having children to get their estate planning started. As a 37-year practitioner, I would say out of every motivation, first would be when people have a kid, I did it, a child, and think, wow, we need to be responsible. We need to do some adulting here, right? We need to be grown up, and we better go get our documents, our plan in place, so that we make sure that this child, this beautiful little bundle of love that's been entrusted to us, is cared for in the event that we can't care for them ourselves. So it tends to be the motivating factor for people. And just to prove to you that this is a no judgment zone, you all know the story, perhaps you'll remember, of the cobbler's children. Well, the cobbler in this fable made the shoes, the beautiful shoes for the dukes and the duchesses, and even the prince and princesses and the king, right? And everybody in the village had beautiful shoes to walk around in, except for the cobbler's children. Because while the cobbler always had the best of intentions to take care of his own family, he always deprioritized them and put them in line below everybody else. Might be like a certain lawyer I know who, I'm talking about myself, who serves his clients with excellence, but had never really bothered to put his own estate plan in place until we had our daughter 13 years ago. And at that point, my dear wife said, "Don't you think we really ought to have an estate plan?" And I said, "Yes, we should." And after being reminded only a couple more times, we put a plan in place. And then 6 years later, those of you that know me well know that we had a beautiful son. And my wife reminded me, "Hey, we've had a child again. Don't you think we ought to update our estate plan?" And I said what too many husbands say, "Yes, dear, I'll get to that presently." Well, presently lasted about 2 years. So it was 2 years before I updated my plan. And I'm here to tell you that I do not throw rocks living in a glass house myself. But during those 2 years, I like to say the fruit of my loins, the carrier of my family name, the future scion of my family tree, was known in my estate planning as, drumroll please, all afterborn children. Now, as an attorney, I could tell you that he was covered. If Krista and I had died during those 2 years, he would have gone with his sister where we would have wanted him to. But don't you think it would have been a rude surprise for him to know that his sister was named and he was just all afterborn children? So not so good on my part, but that's to tell you, and it's for you to tell your friends, that if people haven't done it yet, don't be embarrassed, don't be shy. We get people all the time that have procrastinated and have put off getting their plan done when they need to. So let me tell you, I've seen it all. Um, Most of the problems come for these people in the three generations that we're talking about in the sandwich, which is, ever moving throughout time, from failure to properly engage in estate planning. It covers everything from failing to execute a power of attorney for yourself so that there won't be the necessity of a guardianship, to failing to protect minor children from the battles of a guardianship over them. The last thing you want when you have worked your whole life to build up some wealth is to have folks fighting over who gets to have that. So I do have one example that I regularly give in my full estate planning workshops. A colleague of mine who practices in estate planning in another state, she was kind enough to share to me her own family story. It seems that when her mother was a small child in a great northeastern city, she had a sister and a mother. I don't know the circumstances under which they were being raised by a single parent, which was a little more unusual back in that time. The little girl we're talking about is an old lady now. But one night, the mother entrusted the children to a babysitter and went out into the city. And sadly for that family, mom never came home. I have never known the exact circumstances of what led to her demise, but she didn't make it back. So here you have two minor children at home with a babysitter and no estate planning documents in place. So the first thing that happens, well, think about it first. When you choose a babysitter, you're not exactly choosing who would take care of your children if you weren't able to do so, right? So, I mean, usually for us, it's a good friend's child, usually daughter, who we think can manage 2 or 3 hours at a time with our two. So, leaving them in any sort of long-term entrusted care wasn't in the planning process. Um, but anyway, once the police came to the house, the first thing that was done is the babysitter left, right? And they sent the babysitter home because the babysitter had no right to care for those children. There being no immediate family on the scene and no plan in place, the next thing that happened is those kids went to state care. They were put in a home. Because they were different ages, the two girls were separated, right? So the little one, the one that I know from the story, was taken away, lost her mother, and was taken away from her big sister, basically all in one 24-hour period, right? So fortunately, after a period of time, some of the extended family was able to go to court and win the custody of those children and reunite the family. But my colleague has told me that because of this traumatic event in her childhood, my colleague's mother has basically spent her whole life as a recluse. She has lived a very minimal life, almost as a shut-in. Really hasn't had a lot of joy in her life, hasn't spread her wings, hasn't done a whole lot. Thank goodness she did mother my colleague, who's an amazing person. But this one event, which statistically is predictable, took away really the joie de vivre, the joy of life, from this woman who is now living today. So simple it would have been to have named the person who would have raised those girls, so that at least when she wasn't able to do it herself, they immediately went into the care of another loving family member, rather than the traumatic event of being taken by the state and placed in a home. I mentioned before, I find often that choosing who to care for minor children is a primary instigator of people getting around to going to see me or another qualified estate planning attorney. The other one is typically when people go through a family funeral and realize the way the claws come out at that time, if the planning wasn't in place, and sometimes even if it was, candidly. But the more planning we do, the better job we can do to avoid that. There does seem to be even more of an instinct to take care of our minor children than to care for ourselves. Love yourself as you do others. And so when I say this process takes care of you and your children, a big piece of it is the peace of mind that comes from knowing that you have done the right thing by those that you love. It's really a very simple part of the estate planning process to name who's responsible for taking care of our little ones. If you're unable to do so, in the process, we consider both the care of the person of the kiddos and also who will be responsible for the financial controls in raising your children if you're not able to do so. So it is possible that there would be people in the family who would be great to raise the children, that who do not have financial sophistication. And so it's possible to split those roles out, to have one person in charge of the finances and another in charge of raising them. It also offers a nice check and balance. Other families choose to have the same person in charge of both the money and the children. What you need to make sure is that you've directed who you have chosen for this important role as part of your overall plan. Meaning, you also need to be sure that you have at least a simple will in place, preferably a trust. That's how you can really care for your children long term and show your love for them over their lifetime. That way, the transfer of assets can be managed easily between generations without undue stress and costs to your children and their new guardian. We consider distribution, administration, management, other expenses, and taxes in the process. All of those things will take a bite out of how much you leave for your children to be raised. A big part of what you can best do for your minor children is to have your estate plan in place to properly care for them so that you're not a burden to them should you become ill or die. A quality estate planning firm is going to do flips and turns in order to assist you in protecting your children. You're chilling. We love doing that. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. We want to make sure that what you've worked a lifetime for is distributed easily and at the least possible cost to those you love. While we're living longer these days, we're not immortal. I know that's a hard fact for us Americans to accept. We like to think that we live forever. But once we accept the simple fact that there is a shelf life to these carbon-based bodies we occupy, that we're going to die someday, it only makes sense to consult with an attorney assisting families with smooth transitions. So just envision the peace of mind that you'll have knowing that you provided for your children for the unlikely and unhappy event that, like that mom I told you about, you don't come home some night or somehow you're otherwise unable to care for them. Once you have this in place, you're going to sleep better. And I postulate that you will live longer. And the reason I say that is because you will have less stress in your life. And it's been proven that stress leads to ill health and shortens our lives. I'll be happy to discuss that anytime. So if you have any questions now, there's a chat bar. I think some folks have already found it. Whoop, sorry about that big finger right in here. And yes, you may have noticed the nicely manicured fingernails. It's a Father's Day tradition with my daughter that we go and have them done. It's quite a joy. It's not something I do regularly, but it's time I get to spend with my dear daughter. If there are any questions, go ahead and put them on the chat bar. If there are none, feel free to send questions to questions@rocksolidlaw.com. Thank you, Billy. She is very cool. And we'll be happy to answer them. We also have a pamphlet that we call an estate planning survival guide that we'd be glad to send either electronically or in paper version to anybody that requests it. And if anyone is ready to move forward, Kathy, will be happy to sit with you and talk about the future of your family. And more than anything else on this beautiful morning, don't forget to boogie, children. We'll leave you again with John Lee Hooker. Thanks for joining this morning, everybody. Have a great week.